This is Open Mic, and it's always a pleasure to be back with you. We're here today, and my guest today is Honorable Guy Joseph, our new Minister for Housing. On that score, we're going to get to the meat of the program immediately, and I have a couple of questions for the Minister. Mr. Minister, it is now 10 weeks since your party assumed the reins of government. You served one term as Minister of Infrastructure, one term in opposition, and today you are Minister of Housing. Can you compare the economic status of St. Lucia today versus when your administration left office 5 years ago? What are the significant differences that you discovered?
Let me first of all say thank you, Mr. Shasney, for having me on the program. The last time I sat with you on the program, I sat as the opposition parliamentarian for Castries Southeast. Today we are in government, and taking a little time to look back, during the time I was minister, well, at the time it was Ministry of Communications, Works, Transport and Public Utilities, now Ministry of Infrastructure. Having spent 5 years in opposition, I had time to assess quite a few things in terms of governance, where we are, what is happening in the country, and understanding much better what is required to get St. Lucia to move in the right direction. I must tell you, economically, we are much more challenged than we were back in 2006 or 2011 when we left office. Despite the world economic meltdown back in 2008, which went as far into 2010, 2011, what we have inherited in government is a lot worse than what we left. The reason for this is because there are serious problems with the cash flow of government. I mean, what better way to highlight it than to say that in our quest to pay the projects that was done on the CDP, we got to learn at a presentation that was made to us by officials within the government, not politicians, but officials of various ministries, that the CDP funds, the funds which the Taiwanese give towards the execution of projects within the constituencies, was used to boost government cash flow, and nobody can pinpoint where it went to, whether it was used to pay salaries, interest on loans and things of that nature. So here you find a situation, using the Soufrière Square as an example, where the full amount of money was deposited towards that project, but that money has long been expended, but there's no square to show where this money is spent. Take the VG Beach project. Look at how long this project dragged on. So what we inherited was a situation where the government depleted the reserves. The former Labour administration depleted the reserves that we had at the banks, and then incurred much higher debt. So our debt to GDP ratio is much higher than it had ever been in the history of St. Lucia. And then we found a decline in economy, an economy that declined for 3 consecutive years. I cannot recall in recent history when we ever had such a bad performance by any government. So what we inherited is a situation where there is really no money to do anything. And when the former Prime Minister, Dr. Anthony, said that they were managing the economy, and I heard them recently saying how they saved us from going to the IMF, I would love a team of experts. It don't have to be from outside. It could be from St. Lucia, because we have people with the capacity to do so, to come and review government records back in 2011 when we left office compared to what it is now, and see how bad things are now compared to 2011.
Mr. Minister, can I ask one question?
Sure.
If what you're saying is correct, in your humble opinion, where did the extra expenses come from that created the fact that all this money is being received, not being put to its proper use, and yet is it because more jobs were created? Where did the money go? More money had to go somewhere.
Well, unemployment is the unemployment rate is higher, but the government employment rate is higher. Because you see, what the government did was to take money from the private sector, caused a lot of businesses in the private sector to fold. And then government tried to absorb the employment themselves. But we know that the jobs that government created are just artificial jobs. They are not real jobs. Yeah. And they are borrowing money to finance these jobs.
So that's where the money went.
I mean, this is crazy. Anybody who runs a business, a basic business, it could be the lady who sells with a tray by the road, or somebody who just have a cooler walking around and selling drinks. They know that you cannot spend more than you are earning, or else you will eventually run out of stock and run out of money. So the government employed a policy where they gave hefty contracts to workers. So workers who usually worked in the public service and got a regular public servant salary, they brought in people above those persons, paid them a much higher salary on contract. But at the end of these contracts, they also get a gratuity of 25% of the value of their contract. Take, for example, permanent secretaries at grade 21. When we left, there were about 6 or 7. When Labour Party, that's when we left office in 2006. As we came back into office there were about 14 or 15 permanent secretaries at grade 21.
So what's going to happen now? You're saddled with that?
We are saddled with that. We are saddled with things that is unimaginable. I mean, can you imagine being in government and having to work with an attorney general who was appointed by the previous government? Now, nobody can be fooled with this cheap talk about this is a public servant. She is not a career public servant. She did not come through the ranks of the public service to be employed. She was handpicked by the Prime Minister to be the Attorney General, negotiated a very hefty contract to get her to come in and be the Attorney General, although she was appointed by the public service. But because the Prime Minister directed the public service to appoint somebody, does that make the person a public servant? Now, some people feel that because we are in government, we are not supposed to say certain things. But I refuse to sit in government and take the blows for governance, for things that we did not create. So here we are. And a lot of people blame our new Prime Minister, and he has to take some blame for what happened in the Parliament, because I believe that better preparation could have been done. And we've had that conversation. And he knows that we need improvement. But what many people are not paying attention to is that the Prime Minister has an Attorney General. Who can he feel comfortable to go to that Attorney General for guidance and direction as to what happens? Because when it comes to the Parliament of St. Lucia, the bulk of the business of Parliament is done between the Attorney General and the Prime Minister. We don't have an Attorney General that we appointed. We have an Attorney General who was appointed by Dr. Kenny Anthony. And it's like having Dr. Kenny Anthony in the government of St. Lucia in terms of the cabinet and the decision making and everything that is happening. Now, people don't want to face that reality. But we have a situation that is very unfortunate. But it is not just the government of the United Workers' Party it is affecting. It is affecting the country and the governance of this country. And people don't want to talk about it because we are afraid of stepping on the toes of certain people. But the business of the country is more important than the business of Prime Minister Alan Chasney or former Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony, because whatever happens in this country affects all of us. And it cannot be that a government would have to work with people in critical positions like this, and if it was a career public servant not appointed by a politician, then the government would not have had an issue with this, because we deal with all the permanent secretaries and all the people who are in the public service. But when it comes to the advice of the Attorney General, and I'm not saying that the Attorney General cannot give good advice, the question is, can we trust? Is there that level of trust? Because you don't just wake up one morning and trust somebody to say, okay, because you are that person, I trust you. Trust is earned. Trust is built over a period of time. So these are the challenges that we have. And these are some of the reasons why you would see certain irregularities happening in government until we can get over some of the hurdles. We have a Public Service Commission appointed by the former Prime Minister. So the level of cooperation that we would expect in making some of the changes to facilitate the smooth flow of government, how does it happen? We look at the U.S. government. U.S. elections going on now. When the new president comes in, is the new president saddled with everybody that the old president had? Doesn't he come in with his entire team of people around him to drive the agenda on which the people elect whoever the president is? So if we want to be successful as a country, if we want political parties to carry out their mandate, there must be some latitude that is given. But Dr. Anthony was creating a dynasty kind of operation in St. Lucia, where even if he's out of government, he has his stronghold, his foot soldiers in every corner of government. And these people are not working in the interest of St. Lucia. They are working in the interest of the party that put them where they were.
So based on what you're saying today, you definitely have a problem. But how do you intend to address that problem?
Well, our hands are tied. So it is for the persons to use their own good gesture and to cooperate with the government and to make things happen. Because at the end of the day, people are bombarding us on every side. Why are you all not doing this? Why are you all not doing that? But government follows structure. There are rules that govern what happens in government. So as ministers, we cannot just come in and say we fire this person and we hire this person. There's a process through which everything must take place. And it is going to take us time to be able to resolve all of the issues that need to be resolved so that we can begin to govern in the manner and to keep to everything that we told the people we are going to do on their behalf. Well, so these are our challenges.
Yeah. St. Lucia, you've heard it yourself of what the situation is today. And you can fully appreciate now why certain things cannot take place based on what the minister has just elaborated upon. So we're asking for your patience at this time until this matter is settled, and whatever you as a citizen can do and say so that the persons who are seen as obstructionists can understand that St. Lucia is greater than all of us. So this is something, as the minister said, it will take some time. We have a couple other areas we want to move on to. Mr. Minister, I know it's not your field, but the public appear to be very excited about the resurrection of the banana industry in St. Lucia. Many people have said, well, it will never go back to what it was 30, 40 years ago, but if it can even reach 60, 70% to where it is, it's a plus. I understand from listening to Mr. Ezekiel Joseph last night that Windfresh is back on board. I hope and trust it's in a very meaningful way, because we all know the difficulties we had with Windfresh. And the fact that some 3,000 boxes of bananas will start moving weekly from St. Lucia to France, along with what we have in the UK market, will certainly help. I know you're not directly in the banana industry, but you're within that belt and you have a fairly good idea what is going on. in your opinion, if the plans go on as expected, do you see, what is the feedback from the farmers so far?
Well, a lot of farmers have been coming to me asking various questions about the level of involvement. Even on Thursday night, I had a meeting with the residents in my community where I was having a town hall meeting with the residents of Forestier, where I was updating them on what is happening, and these are some of the questions that came up in terms of the discussions taking place. I must tell you that I'm very excited about that myself, seeing that I represent a constituency predominantly
Farming.
Farming is the predominant form of employment and income for the people in this community. What I have learned over the years is for agriculture in general to be successful, you need a main crop. And all other forms of agriculture would revolve around that main crop.
That makes sense.
And it's also a cash crop, where you guaranteed, you know beforehand what your returns are going to be. So any resurgence of the banana industry, even if it is to 40 or 50% of what it used to be, we'll see a major shift in the economic fortunes of St. Lucia for the better.
Yes.
Because with agriculture, with bananas, you get all the other crops around it.
Correct.
So when somebody plants some bananas, they will take care of the mango trees, the citrus fruits, they will plant more coconut trees, they will plant some dashing and some yam and some plantain and all other things, because when you're into the farm already, you do more. But if you just have to go and plant some dashing or yams or these things, people may not be inclined to do so.
Correct.
So whenever you have a main crop, it helps to boost the production in other areas. And what I was particularly pleased about is the level of interest that Windfresh has shown, not just in bananas, but in other non-traditional crops for the market, that we can look at capitalizing, because you already have the ship leaving St. Lucia and there's space on board where we can look to market a lot more products in the Europe area than we are doing presently. So that in itself should bring some hope to the farmers. We are presently negotiating, and in my discussions with the Prime Minister, when we looked at some of the funds being made available by the Kuwaitis, is to help identify some of these farm roads. Because if you are going to boost the banana production, a lot of these farm roads have been abandoned over the years.
Right.
We would have to spend some money to get these roads back into a condition that is suitable for the farmers. So the selection process would be based on the farmers who show an interest in returning to the productive sector of the banana industry, and maybe their roads will get the priority, so that we can see a boost in production, which would mean good foreign exchange to put alongside what we are already gaining from the tourism sector. Would be a good boost for our economy, and especially allowing money to flow within the rural communities, because the agricultural sector is the backbone of the rural communities.
Tell me something, Mr. Minister. Talking to a few people, generally in St. Lucia, some are optimistic and some are pessimistic. Some people have the opinion that you will not, St. Lucia cannot get the labor required to go back into farming. What is your take?
I would rather try something and fail at it than sit and not do anything.
Yeah, because my feeling is that, you know, you have 12,000 farmers. I know that some of them have got other jobs, but the major part of those people are not being productive. And I cannot believe that a person who has an opportunity to work for themselves and earn a living would forsake that.
we have to do some reorientation of our thinking and our workers in this country.
Yeah.
And we cannot continue to bury our heads in the sand and pretend that the problems do not exist. The problems are there, but there's the saying that necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
When you have these challenges, you would find people rising to the occasion and being able to meet the requirements. Our people are not lazy people. Our people have been hardworking people over the years. We may have gone through a phase where, because of the unemployment situation that we have faced for an extended period of time, the high levels of employment, the low production of that sector, and not getting the kind of returns that people expected. This demoralized a lot of people and did not encourage them to go back into that sector. But I believe once we begin to see the returns and we begin to see the benefits of that sector, once you start seeing the FAR vehicles again, and you see the van loads of bananas lining up along the weighbridge and all of the things happening, you would see a different mentality. I am one who is optimistic. I will not be pessimistic about it. And I believe that our people are ready to work. There are lots of people who come to us and they say, I would love to be able to do something. And given that the skill set of our people, based on the former Prime Minister, Dr. Kendi Antony's own admission, that more than 70% of the workforce is not adequately equipped for the jobs that are available. We can use the agricultural sector as a transition period while we train our people to be able to take the better jobs in the market. We can use the agricultural sector to create the employment. So the employment that government must find money to create step jobs and pay $50 to a step worker for a few hours on the roadside. Can we not utilize these same workers on the farms?
Well, I've said
and have a productive sector? So rather than have these people working 7 days in 3 months, we can maybe have them work 6 weeks in 3 months on the farms. And then you are not just spending money to cut grass that grows the following day,
right,
but you are bringing in returns. You are doing something that is productive. It's a very nice way of subsidizing your farmers and the farming sector,
yeah,
to be able to produce what is required. So yes, is there a guarantee that it will work? There's nothing has a guarantee in life, but it is worth taking a risk and hoping that it works out. And knowing that you have a market available, you are seeing new doors opening in new markets, is for us to now look at every possibility of doing what it takes. And if we fail, like I said, I would rather fail having tried to do something
than not try
But
you know, just to begin with, Mr. Minister, if you take 3,000 boxes of bananas at the new price, that is almost $130,000 a week.
Exactly.
Okay? Now, $130,000 a week times 4, that's $500,000 a month, times 12. That's $6 million a month of a fresh type of investment. So that in itself has to be correct approach. It has to be. And you open them, because I was told only last week by some St. Lucians who were shopping at a supermarket in the UK, and they saw a mark St. Lucia bananas, and they went for those bananas and paid a higher price for them, because it is said that the St. Lucia bananas are of better quality than many bananas, for sure better than the Central American bananas. We have now come to the end of the first segment of our program. We'll be right back. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we are now back to the second segment of our program. We've had a lengthy discussion on the agricultural side and the economic side. we're now going to address the minister's forte, which is housing. I don't know how many of us have taken the time just to walk around Castries and to observe. One, when you look at the CDC houses, as they are called, and you look at the condition, the structural condition, the environmental side of it, the Castries market, just go to the back and see the deplorable condition under which those vendors have to operate. I said it before elections, I'm saying it after elections. This is not a political ploy. This is a form of sincerity within myself that hurts me to the core. I consider vendors, small entrepreneurs, they are not a scourge to our economy. These are people that go out and buy their stuff and sell. They are entrepreneurs. It hurts me to see those poor people at the back of the market facing the elements, that is, the rain, the sun, the heat, on a daily basis to eke out an existence. When it's very, very simply, one can have 40 to 50 columns strategically placed with a roofing over the people. Pressure wash the place. We have a number of people at Bordelais who are competent. Make about 400 or 500 trays, paint them in a simple color, and give it to the people. And more tourists can go there. Make it acceptable. The challenges those poor people have, it is hurtful, St. Lucia. Hurtful. So on that score, I'm going to ask the minister, one, what are his plans to try to do something about the city, knowing that right alongside the Calvary Road, adjacent to Castries, there are 18 acres of land owned by the DeVoe family, which can be purchased at a very reasonable price, where at least 5 or 6 four-story buildings can be put. And if you can't do it immediately, but move some of the buildings and start cleaning up Castries. It hurts me when people come away and say, is that your city? And on a final note, before I ask the minister to come in, for the last 3 weeks, since Mr. Shariki dismantled the old M&C building next in the Queensgate area, that whole main drain has not been cleaned for years. Can you imagine that the taxi drivers and the vendors there, I was there till yesterday afternoon, there's 7 inches of black water coming above. It used to be stuck in the drains, now it's above the drain. My goodness, what will it take to clean that whole drain and help the flooding which takes place in St. Lucia, Mr. Minister?
This is such a broad portfolio in terms of housing and what is happening. But I will try to touch it in parts, in brief, not in detail. The CDCs, now I will make a couple of statements here because, like I said, there are many things that confront us that many people are afraid to talk about. And the CDCs happen to be one of them. And every parliamentarian in government, in opposition, who represents Central Castries is under pressure when it comes to the CDCs because of the people who occupy the CDCs. The reality is that some people are renting the CDCs and they are subleasing to other tenants. So they themselves are not using it, but they are subleasing to other people.
So they are business people.
Yes. But who's paying the price for it? The government of St. Lucia. I have said, and I'm putting it out for discussion because I want it to be a talking point. Everywhere in the world, it costs more to live in your city than in St. Lucia. So rent is the cheapest in the CDCs. Yet government is called upon to maintain. And I can tell you, since I became Minister of Housing, the number of telephone calls that I get and people who come to see me because they want to be able to rent an apartment in the CDC because of the rates of rent. You choose one person and you have another 999 persons upset with you. So why should any politician want to be in the situation, to be the one to make a determination as to who should get an apartment in the CDC? That's a difficult one. That's very challenging. We need to fix the city. We need to improve the living conditions in the CDCs. Some of them are subhuman conditions, but because the rent is cheap, people choose to go there. If a private person was renting a building like this, would the government allow them to do so? These are some of the hard questions that we must face. And if we are going to shift things around in this country, we must face it. So when I met with the NHC, I said to the National Housing Corporation, how will you go about making the decision? So I said, if I had my way, you know what I would do? I would put out the CDCs to tender. So there are 5 apartments for rent. You put in a tender as to how much you're willing to pay to live in that CDC. So you see, just like a company selling a vehicle, 10 persons want the vehicle, they say put in a tender. Because we've got to find a formula that is above board. Now, is that the best formula? It may not be. Somebody may have a better idea than mine. But I'm saying, how do we continue to do things the way we are doing it and expect a different result? So we need to pay attention to this. I like the idea of the 18 acres of land and what can be done with these lands, because we know that these CDCs were built after some of them after the 1948 fire as temporary housing.
Correct.
And we have a way of making all temporary things permanent in St. Lucia.
Mm-hmm.
So temporary housing, if my memory serves me right, maybe completed back in 1955 or thereabout, and they are still here. We call it temporary housing. Now they are the CDCs. So we've got to find a way as a country, and there must be wide consultation. We must have a discussion. The people of St. Lucia must be willing to come forward and speak. There are many people with ideas as to things. And one of the things I like about you as the host of this program and as a business person in St. Lucia is you always speak your mind about what your ideas are. People may not always agree with you, but at least you put out something to cause people to think in a different light. And I'm trying to get people to understand why we need to make some changes. Because every year, government is required to put millions of dollars to bail out every housing corporation that is established. We presently have an NHC that is insolvent from what they are telling us. I'm hearing that NIC alone is owed about $49 million by the NHC.
Wow.
The day-to-day operations is over 1.5 million in the red. We have a lawsuit on a property in Rivadori for $7 million when the property was valued at $2 million. Contractors were engaged. The land was transferred by the previous government into the hands of a company that they call Bow Panel. 51% is owned by the foreign company without an alien landholding license. 49% owned by the government of St. Lucia. And the NHC was paying a lawyer a hefty sum of money to try and get the land back in the name of St. Lucia. So here's what the previous government did. They transferred the land out of the name of the NHC, gave it to a company, then engaged a lawyer to get the land back from the company to the government of St. Lucia. So I have asked whether that was a way that the government found a creative way to siphon the money out of the resources of the country into the pockets of their friends and their associates.
Wow.
Now, what I'm speaking about there, the evidence is there, you know, and anybody from the previous government who wants to challenge me on that, we are willing, because the court sent it into negotiations and arbitration, and the figures that have been sent to us, where the government now must find $7 million to pay settlement, or pay $6 million and give up a portion of the land. And then that British company that owns the 51% shares of the land, we have not been able to see.
What quantity of land?
You're talking about 38 acres of land in the River Dore. That's part of the Dane land, some of the best land in that area.
Wow.
So this is what we inherited, and this is what we are working with. And that is why people will say, well, you said you are going to do this. We will do what we said we would do, but it's going to take us time, because we have to unfold all of the problems. Every day you sit in the ministry, almost every one of the housing projects started by the previous government have some legal implication one way or the other. So the NHC made certain investments. Take the houses at Moshi, for example. 22 of these houses are sitting there. That's the houses that I raised the issue. Some of them have structural problems. Some of them are up to standard, but way above the cost. These houses cost up to $300 a square foot.
Wow.
And we're talking about a single room house. 300 square feet for $90,000. No tiles on the floor. No painting on the inside. No walls or partitions. Just one toilet and a face basin and a little half wall blocking the toilet. 300 square feet. $90,000. That is the type of investment that the government made. How do you sell back these properties to get back the money that you even spent?
And where did that money come from to do that project?
Loans.
Wow.
And we have to pay these loans back with interest. So I'm saying to St. Lucians, we need to take a little time and pay attention. And that is why I want interested St. Lucians, concerned citizens, to come and verify some of the things we are saying. Because it is easy to take a cheap shot and say, oh, politicians going at each other again. But the lawsuit is there for everybody to see, that we are required to pay this. And you know, when the court gives an order, let me give you another example. The building that SSDF moved into, when they left your property, and they went, and we are trying to find documents. We have not been able to find the documents of the purchase of that building. The government has spent millions of dollars in refurbishing the building, and half of the building cannot be occupied.
Why?
The buildings are mold infested already. I mean, the buildings are not up to the standard that is required. And the SSDF now has to move from where it is. So look at the level of investment. Who drove the government into buying these properties? What was the kickback from these arrangements? You see, the reality is hitting us in the face, and people don't want to pay attention to it. The building is being occupied illegally because there is a court order. The court made a decision that when the residents of the area took the government, the previous government, to court on this matter, and they won the case. Now, if it was an ordinary citizen, what would the government have done? So, because the government enacts laws, can the government break the same laws that it expects its citizens to abide by?
Yeah, this is wrong. Yeah.
It is wrong, and it must be corrected. But look at the extent of the expenditure that the government has incurred. Now, that is a problem in this country. People continue to put the government into serious problems. We have many issues at customs. People's goods are just seized on suspicion, held and locked up. The containers are locked up for years. You know how many lawsuits the government is facing today from people whose goods have been held up by customs? And I'm not saying that customs may not have a right to do so, but you cannot just do things based on suspicion. There must be sufficient evidence to back up what is happening. But when public officials can just take decisions, and at the end of the day, if they are right or they are wrong, the government pays the bill at the end of the day. What is the recourse? What is the requirement on these persons? We were just called to deal with settling a malpractice case at VH where somebody died as a result of something that transpired. So all of these things comes back to the government of St. Lucia to deal with. And we have to get to the point where we begin to hold people accountable for their actions. How can a government pay money, you give away what is yours and you pay money to get it back when nobody didn't ask you to give it, nobody didn't put a gun to your head and say give it away? I mean, this cannot be acceptable.
St. Lucia, this is Open Mic. We've now come to the end of the second segment of our program. We'll be right back. St. Lucia, this is Open Mic. Because of the detailed method that we have used on my show today, we are going to go in 3 segments. So this is the third and final segment that's coming up because there's so much to discuss and the detail. It has been overwhelming, even for me as one who knows a lot more of what's going on. I want to ask the Minister, because it comes under his portfolio, what is the ongoing situation at the St. Jude's Hospital? And when I say St. Jude's, I don't mean the one at the stadium. I mean the one that's being reconstructed, because I saw on the news recently where he had to stop the works going on there. Mr. Minister.
Thank you. St. Jude's is one of the projects that is of greatest concern to us as a government coming into office. Given the strategic importance of St. Jude's, not just to the people of Beaufort, but to the economy of St. Lucia. Anybody who understands that the economy depends specifically on the tourism industry would know that it is a requirement that you have a good hospital within close proximity of your international airport. That is very critical. So you're looking at the strategic importance of St. Jude's, not just as a health facility for the people of the South, but for the lifeblood of the economy of this country. And that is why I'm paying so much careful attention to it. St. Jude Hospital has been housed at the stadium from 2009. We are now in 2016.
7 years.
It is the greatest threat is posed by the present condition of the stadium itself, because we have even been looking at it from the standpoint of whether we need to get some cranes to go down there and pull down the covering from the stands at the stadium, whether it may be safer to do so given that we are in the hurricane season and the potential of a collapse of that part of the facility.
And lawsuits against you.
And the potential negative impact on the operations of the hospital. So when I became Minister of Economic Planning, I realized that St. Jude fell directly under my portfolio, that is the reconstruction of the new St. Jude Hospital. So that is one of the first projects I visited. And I'm telling you, to date, St. Jude is as big a mystery as any mystery in St. Lucia. Why am I saying this? As I speak to you, we have not been able to lay our hands on an approved set of plans for the construction of St. Jude. We have nothing officially from the Development Control Authority to say, these were the plans approved for the St. Jude Hospital, and this is what is being worked on.
So are you saying that presently it looks like an ad hoc situation?
Very ad hoc. It's like a tea boutique arrangement. So today you put a piece over there and tomorrow you add another piece over there. I mean, it is unbelievable that there were consultants, and I will say there were, because one of the things I did when I came in was to start the cleanup immediately. And I said, if you cannot give what you are being paid for, then you ain't working for this ministry anymore. And I know I've had to take a hard line, but this is what I have to do, and this is what I will continue to do. So as I speak to you, when we wrote to the consultant who was on the project, we had to CC the letter to the police.
Wow.
In order to get some information. And I can tell you, we do not have most of the information as I speak. If they have any approved plans, they still have it in their possession, because we have not seen it. The hospital is being constructed. We do not know whether it meets the requirements to be certified as a hospital or to be accredited as a hospital.
Wow.
So that is one of the reasons why we said, look here, I am not going to continue just to finish. And then when we are finished, we realize that
it's not
it does not meet the standards that are required. When I walked through the hospital, I asked them, my height, I'm not very tall compared to you. And when I walk through certain sections of the hospital, I actually feel I have to bend my head.
Wow.
So can you imagine you walking through that hospital, and some of the issues now that may be the acceptable standard, I'm not saying it is not, but to my ordinary eye, it does not look well.
Now, what areas of the hospital you're talking about that have this limited height?
The corridors that people walk through,
Wow.
and that is where you get a lot of movement of
Yeah,
persons.
correct.
Because I asked questions and I was given some kind of explanation. I went through the documents that I have in my possession. Not one of the documents was signed by the consultant who got the contract for the hospital. Everything was signed by his workers. And the information I'm getting is some of the workers who are doing whatever designs they have do not even have an engineering or an architectural degree. Now, this is just information that we have. It needs to be verified, but we are getting no cooperation from anybody. So I have to speculate as a minister. And I have to put out the information because there are people out there who know. And when we speak, they come out and they tell us, yes, I know this and I know that. So this is where it's at. $95 million has been spent on the hospital. And it is nowhere close to completion. 95 million. Now, many hospitals have started after us and have opened their doors. And the question is, why is it taking St. Jude so long to be completed? My conclusion is the people who are working, not the contractors, the people working on behalf of the government of St. Lucia was making so much money on this project that they would never want the project to end. Because if a hospital that, and you know how bad it is? In 2011, they were asked, equipment was ordered for St. Jude Hospital. And I have the letter. They asked to expedite the shipping of the equipment. That is how ready they saw the hospital to be open. In 2011. This equipment came in. We lost the elections, the equipment came in. The equipment was stored badly, left in a container.
In the heat.
In the heat. The warranty period ran out on this equipment. So we have 2 containers from the information that I have. I have not gone into the container. We have a lot of equipment that came for the hospital. Equipment that is needed by both VH and St. Jude. left in a container, presently of no use to the country of St. Lucia, but paid for. And I believe somebody must answer. Somebody must pay for it. Because it cannot be that people being paid by the government to do a job could be so careless and reckless. If you realize the hospital is not ready to be opened, could the equipment not have been sent to St. Jude and to the stadium and allow it to be used there? Some sent to VH, allow it to be used there. Even if you had to give some to Tapio, couldn't you have done that? You're going to leave all that new equipment to be spoiled, paid for, and then we now have to dump all of this equipment.
Wow.
And the hospital is still in need of equipment. So we now have to find new equipment to put in the hospital when it is completed. And you are telling me all of this was happening while the former Prime Minister, Dr. Kenny Anthony, was the Minister of Economic Development, under whose direct purview the reconstruction of St. Jude Hospital was. And there's enough documentary evidence in the ministry raising concerns about what was happening. But nobody paid attention because they were more concerned about campaigning politically than about seeing to it that the affairs of the people who elected them into office was being run effectively. So what we have done with St. Jude, we had to stop the work to assess where we are. We have to assess what it takes to complete the hospital. We have to assess that it is up to standard. One of the things I found out, some of the equipment they wanted to store in the basement of the building. When the equipment came in, they realized that the equipment was too high for the basement. So they had to go back and break down the flooring and excavate part of it to get the height that is required. I'm told that where the water pump is now filled with water and is a breeding ground for mosquitoes at St. Jude. Now all of this is happening and the government has paid in excess of maybe 12 or 15 million. We have not been able to finalize the figures in consultancy fees alone on that hospital.
How much?
12 or 15 million. It may range. I don't want to give a definite figure because figures keep coming in every day on a different thing. But I'm telling you, it is well over $10 million in consultancy fees. And there was another big contract for a project manager. So outside of the consultants was a project manager. All these people being paid directly by the government to oversee the operations of the hospital.
That explains what you said earlier. When you said about all the monies that they got from Taiwan, which should have gone to the projects, went into the consolidated fund, and when actually Dr. Anthony's party won the elections, this is what he campaigned on. He criticized the United Workers' Party money for spending the money illegally or whatever the case may be, but it's put in the consolidated fund, but it changes its complexion when it gets there.
Completely. So I'm saying to St. Lucians, it is not that we are being careless or reckless about anything. It's not a political vendetta that we are trying to settle when it comes to St. Jude's. We now have to engage a Canadian firm, and as you would be aware that set of persons have agreed to assist us in getting assistance from the Canadian government to review the designs of the building in order to see to it that it meets the accreditation standards that is required to operate as a recognized hospital. So we must do these things because it is pointless to building a hospital is not like building a house or a warehouse.
No.
There are specifications that must be met because you're talking about, you have operating theaters, you have specific requirements that must be met so that there cannot be contamination from one area into another area, your quarantine areas within the hospitals and all of this. Very important. So what we are doing now, we are conducting a technical audit. And when the technical audit is completed, Then we are going to give a full report on where we are with St.
Who is
Jude.
doing that for you? That, or is it locally or for the audit?
Yes, the technical audit is being done by a local firm, FDL Consultants.
Okay.
They are doing the technical audit. But for the accreditation part of it, we were thinking of engaging a firm in Canada because we know that the Canadians have a lot of experience in hospitals and things of that nature. But we have been offered some assistance through another avenue, which we are going to explore before we pay anybody if we can get it done for free.
You know, it's really hurtful because I distinctly recall when that hospital got burnt, that the business community, and which I was deeply involved in, we collected some $5 million and made a donation to St. Jude's Hospital for the reconstruction. And I distinctly recall that I brought in a company from Trinidad called NH International. I actually flew them down to to St. Jude's by helicopter. We took the pictures, and within a couple months, 2 months or so, we got a quotation that that hospital could have been fully refurbished as is, without any extension, as is, as the American, for 18 million EC dollars, and they would have delivered it in 7 months. That was made available to the government of St. Lucia. And Lord behold, when I hear today that 160 million has been spent.
No, 95 million.
Sorry?
95 million.
No, 95 million has been spent. But no, but the total cost, 95 million was spent when?
As it is there now.
Oh, 95 million has been spent. Okay. 95 million has been spent to date since the hospital got burnt.
Yes.
Okay. I heard otherwise, but I have to go along with what you say. 95 million has been spent, and from what I'm hearing, a warehouse has been constructed, a cathedral has been put, and the actual hospital itself is incomplete. I mean, this is unbelievable. You know, when we look at what's happening in the US and other countries, we have to hold town hall meetings. We have to hold town hall. So the local people, those who are not listening to the show, and people who just see tidbits on a TV, need to sit down and be told what is going on. Because unless we address the situation, a fool is one that makes the same mistake twice. And we cannot allow St. Lucia to go on making these. These are expensive mistakes for which you, the public, have to pay for. Our tax monies, that's where it's going. I mean, when you look at collecting $3.5 million a year in VAT for the last how many years, and many St. Lucians have asked the question, where has that money gone? And look at the state we're in today with the debt that we have. So it is really unforgivable. Yeah.
Well, I just want to assure St. Lucians that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, our technical audit of St. Jude would be completed. We would give a full report to St. Lucians. We would be able to tell you the status of the hospital. We would be able to give a projection for a completion date, because we would know the scope of the works that is required in order to complete the hospital. We would be able to put some cost in, and I guess the reason why the costing continues to fluctuate so many times is because there's no plan. If you don't have a plan, how are you going to know what you're building and what it is costing? So when I went down to St. Jude, one of the things I said is, let us stop the works on all the periphery buildings around the hospital. Let us focus on the east wing, the west wing, and the operating theater section. So that if we have a problem, we can move the core hospital back to its original operation. And that is what my focus is. The next few dollars that would be available to be spent, that is where it will be spent at St. Jude, so that we can make a hospital facility available for the south of the island.
St. Lucia, this is open mic. I had a couple other areas to discuss, but the detailed discussion which took place in this show has absorbed most of my time. So I have to say this is open mic, saying thank you for listening, and until next Sunday, we'll be back with you.